the day that we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
But to be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning. Sunday morning. We have a responsibility. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States.
How it must have been to grow up with the sky, to feel the sun, the wind, the trees. But your people took it for granted. We're human too, you know. Eyes, teeth, hands, blood. Exactly like you. And yet, it was humans that built this place. I believe they figured out how to make a copy of the body, but not the soul. The soul remains one, shared by two. They created the tethered so they could use them to control the ones above. Like puppets.
But they're on record. This is their plan, and you're the guinea pigs. I'm the guinea pig. My children are the guinea pig for their operations. All of this is guinea pigging on us because they know out of 7.5 million people, every one of us has different proteins. Starting 45 years ago, a worldwide program of the UN taking everybody's blood at birth, saying it's for a protein test for a blood disease, it all goes to the United Nations. We first exposed that with nurses in 1997. There were lawsuits, became national news by 2000. That's something going on 45 years. And it turned out the companies bought your blood sample, patented the original protein. When you go to get gene therapy, people are being told that'll be $1 million. We own your own body's protein.
But the most salacious hints of a deeper agenda are not to be found in the Gates' public associations, but in the associations that they have tried to hide from the public.
Jeffrey Epstein may be dead, but this story isn't. A shocking new report from the New York Times sheds light on the connection between Microsoft founder Bill Gates and the late Jeffrey Epstein. After Gates' name came up in connection with Epstein and MIT Media Lab, Gates gave a statement to the Wall Street Journal where he insisted he did not have any business relationship or friendship with Epstein. But new reporting from the New York Times outlines numerous meetings between Gates and Epstein and a conversation with Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, a connection between their foundation and J.P. Morgan to set up a charitable fund that would financially benefit Epstein. You know what I want to know? Why?
Beginning in August of last year, a string of information connecting Bill Gates to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein began to emerge. Flight logs revealed that Gates had flown on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. An email surfaced showing disgraced MIT Media Lab director Joi Ito, who resigned from his position after it was discovered that he had helped cover up Jeffrey Epstein's identity as an anonymous donor to the lab, informing his staff that a $2 million donation to the lab in 2014 was a gift from Bill Gates, directed by Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein's will even named Boris Nikolic, a Harvard-trained immunologist who served as the chief scientific advisor to both Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and who appears in the sole publicly known photo of Epstein and Gates' 2011 meeting at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, as the backup executor of Epstein's estate. As it turns out, the attempt to suppress the Gates-Epstein story may have been an attempt to suppress the revelation of an altogether different shared interest.
Sources say several accusers have come forward in New Mexico, where Epstein owns a sprawling ranch. According to a new report published in the New York Times, not verified by NBC News, Epstein wanted to use the ranch for controlled breeding, using his DNA to improve humanity. Citing 2 award-winning scientists and an advisor to large companies and wealthy individuals, the article reports Epstein surrounded himself with leading scientists and would tell them he wanted to have 20 women impregnated at a time on the ranch.
The already scarcely believable Jeffrey Epstein story took another bizarre turn in August of 2019, when it was reported that Epstein hoped to seed the human race with his DNA. As the New York Times explained, Epstein's plan to impregnate 20 women at a time at his New Mexico ranch in order to seed the human race with his DNA, a plan he told to a number of the scientific luminaries he kept in his orbit, put a modern gloss on a very old idea. Mr. Epstein's vision reflected his long-standing fascination with what has become known as transhumanism, the science of improving the human population through technologies like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. Critics have likened transhumanism to a modern-day version of eugenics, the discredited field of improving the human race through controlled breeding. Epstein's interest in genetics led him to sponsor a number of scientists working in the field, including George Church, a Harvard geneticist whose lab received funding from Epstein's foundation from 2005 to 2007 for cutting-edge science.
Carl Sagan, who was kind of a mainstream man in so many ways, he wrote this book, The Dragons of Eden, about the reptilian connection to humanity and human genetics, and he says in there was the effect to understand the human's reptilian characteristics is to understand so much about human behavior. Quite right. It's in the DNA, the hard drive, which has been put in there. Now, one of the hardest things that people have to understand, and I completely appreciate it, is this idea of shape-shifting. Now, it's an ancient thing in terms of accounts all over the world, not just shape-shifting between human and reptilian, but shape-shifting between human and many different forms, animal forms, etc. People think, hey, it's impossible, mate. How could a body change into another body? I mean, the person would die, wouldn't they? Well, that's not what's happening. As we talked about in the first half, the only place that the physical reptilian form and the physical human form exist is in here, when their energetic form is decoded into a holographic, apparently physical form. So when something's shape-shifting, it shifts in the decoding mechanism by which we decode different energy fields. It's literally like changing a television channel. You've got the human field, which is obscuring the reptilian field, because they hide behind the human field, so we don't know what the hell's going on. And if I'm observing the human field, that's the prime field that I'm decoding, I will see a human. But if this becomes the prime field, suddenly, for whatever reason, I'm now decoding the reptilian field.
I can safely say I have no idea what happened in this next clip. This went viral a few days ago. Nancy Pelosi was doing one of the Sunday morning shows, and look at this awkward moment.
On Friday, I started there early for voting the day that we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
But to be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
I don't know what the hell happened there. Her brain rebooted mid-sentence. It, like, crashed and rebooted. And she started the interview from the beginning again, even though they were already mid-interview. And if you go back and watch it again, George Stephanopoulos' face was like, bro, what?
And it blows my mind, but that's the culture. It's a culture of fear for sure. You know, and it's a big culture of mind control too. MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google that and look into it.
You're not taking any arrows out of your quiver.
One of the most common requests that I receive on the channel is to cover more love stories within mythology, and with today being Valentine's Day, it seems like a perfect time to discuss Eros, the Greek god of love. Now, the exact origins and where Eros came from do slightly vary. In some accounts, Eros was a primordial being, a child of chaos. He was also responsible for blessing the union between Gaia and Uranus, who then created the universe as we know it in Greek mythology. He was almost seen as a facilitator, encouraging the unions between other primordial deities. The ancient tragedians saw Eros as both positive and negative, as the unions he created would often lead to virtue as well as misery. In these older depictions, he's often seen as a plump, overweight child carrying a bow. You might be somewhat familiar with his Roman counterpart, Cupid. Anyone who was hit by the arrows he would fire would fall instantly in love, but the question of whether he chose his targets carefully or just fired at random, knowing that they would fall in love regardless, is one that I'll leave you to consider. There are some conflicting beliefs as to who exactly his father was, with some believing it could have been Hermes and others Zeus, but it's widely regarded that the god of war Ares was his true father. The physical appearance of Eros also shifted in these depictions. Much like his mother and his father, he was considered extremely beautiful, differing vastly from images of a plump child.
When her father asked for guidance from the oracle of Apollo, the god of light, reason, and prophecy, he was told to abandon his daughter on a rocky crag, where she would marry a cruel and savage, serpent-like winged evil. Alone on the crag, Psyche felt Zephyr, the west wind, gently lifting her into the air. It set her down before a palace. "You are home," she heard an unseen voice say. "Your husband awaits you in the bedroom, if you dare to meet him." She was brave enough, Psyche told herself. The bedroom was so dark that she couldn't see her husband, but he didn't feel serpent-like at all. His skin was soft, and his voice and manner were gentle. She asked him who he was, but he told her this was the one question he could never answer. If she loved him, she would not need to know.
Most Western cultures see the butterfly as elegant, graceful, and full of beauty. It's a symbol usually attributed to life, hope, or remembrance of a loved one. So why is it that the Illuminati frequently use this symbol to mark their subjects of mind control, otherwise known as monarch programming, MKUltra, MK Naomi, or Manchurian candidates? Make no mistake, mind control is a real thing. The CIA programs MKUltra and MK Naomi are declassified programs which ran from 1953 to 1973 and engaged in illegal activities of subjecting unwilling participants to drug use, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of psychological torture to control their minds. And you thought it was only the Nazis. There's a ton of information out there on MKUltra, and there's a wealth of information on the internet about its history.
It's currently happening behind closed doors every single day, particularly within the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases, right? But here's the thing. On the surface, okay, it sounds like a movie plot. Until recently.
For real, you've watched me a long time.
Shall we? Okay, so now we're seeing that it's not a flash that starts this sequence. It's the eye seems to roll over like a slot machine or something. I mean, that is weird. Look at that. See that? And then the eye becomes some sort of a, I don't know. It's internally lit. I mean, that's not a reflection. Did you see that? Did you see how the eyeball kind of rolled?
We can read about these accounts of all sorts of weird beings who had their way with humans. Now, all we have to do is to approach these stories and look at them from a modern perspective, to eliminate the always suggested symbolism and look at these events for what they potentially really were.
This is the alien takeover. World exclusive. There is a alien takeover via nanotech vaccines now happening on a planetary scale.
Our posturings, Our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves.
MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood. If you don't know, Google that and look into it.